All right, here we go again. So welcome to Ujima Wednesdays, where we focus and discuss, co-create together with a focus on financial and political education. Today we'll be exploring the world of bookstores, but particularly that's the focus for this month in terms of our feasibility study. And we've invited Rozzie Bound, Representative here, Roy Karp, to share a little bit more about the bookstore as it currently is. And then we'll make some space and room for everyone to kind of chime in with some questions and thoughts. And so I am going to step back and invite you, Roy, to at this point take the stage. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I will begin with a caveat that I'm not an expert. I'm a learner. I'm a newbie, what we call a newbie in the book selling trade, which is why I kind of frantically texted Kate Late at JP Paper Cuts this afternoon to be like, "Hey, Kate, can you come join this meeting? They're expecting some expertise on selling books, and you have that." I'm just kind of faking it till I make it, but I I started this bookstore called Rozzie Bound in 2019. We began as a pop-up in the Rosendale substation, which was used as a beer hall. And that was fun while it lasted. The owner of Turtle Swan Brewing loved us. He's like, "You guys really know a lot of people in the community. Like, you seem like you're really well connected. This is exactly what we want to see in the space here." And I told my bartenders to just give you beer if you want beer. I was like, "Okay, this is fun." And people were coming up to the book stand and with a beer in hand, like, "So are these books for sale?" I'm like, "Yes, they are for sale. Would you like to buy one?" And anyway, it was awesome. We did like 3 pop-ups, 3 weekends. We were hauling the books up into the substation, and it's basically remainders and secondhand books. It was pretty much a marketing endeavor to basically just put this idea out into the ether of Rosendale, like, "Hey, how do people feel about having a bookstore? And we might make it community owned. We might become a cooperative. We might be a consumer cooperative. We might be a worker owned cooperative. We don't know. We're just trying to figure it out. What do you think? What are your thoughts?" This kind of thing. And because that's the kind of person I am, I'm just like a kind of an outgoing person, and I like to chat with people, and I love to meet my neighbors. And I have a 6-year-old, and she was hanging out with my then partner Tom Nealon's daughter and son, who were 6 and 12, and it was all good. It was fun times. Then we had this thing you guys may remember last year. We had this global pandemic thing called COVID, and we had to shut down the pop-ups. We just shut it down, and so there I was with this fledgling business idea. It was all good because I didn't invest capital. I didn't leverage my home to do these pop-ups. I bought a few $100s worth of secondhand books. It was basically like a little stand. So it was fine. I put the books in my basement, and I started selling books on Bookshop. And so Bookshop is great. They had only just started in January 2020. So they talk about good timing. It's this platform that with no cost to booksellers allows a bookstore to sell inventory from the Ingram catalog. Ingram is the #1 book wholesaler in the world. I think they sell more books than Amazon. So they're a major player. So Bookshop, when you search for a book on Bookshop, on any Bookshop site, you're searching the Ingram catalog. So you're literally searching for millions of titles. And then at the same time, you can create shelves. You can curate a shelf. So that's what we did. We started curating shelves that we thought were cool. I think one of our first shelves was a racial justice bookshelf. And we started to develop community partnerships. Last year, we actually donated proceeds. We had different arrangements with different organizations, but we had Greening Rozzie was one of our partners. The Louis D. Brown Peace Institute was one of our community partners. Friends of the Rosendale Branch Library, and Rise. So the way, just to back up a little bit on Bookshop, they give you, if you're an ABA member, they give you 30% of the proceeds, which is kind of below, quote unquote, below industry standards. Typically, your discount if you buy books wholesale, if you actually buy books from publishers or from a wholesaler like Ingram, they're going to give you between 42 to like 50, I've heard different things, 42 to 55% discount, right? Which is kind of shows you what your profit margins are. That's kind of, those kind of publishers going to be a better margin for you than a wholesaler, which is why people try to shift off of Ingram. Like a lot of stores start off with Ingram, and then they try to like wean themselves off of Ingram and try to go directly to publishers, which is more work. It's less efficient than just doing a huge order from Ingram. But you tend to get, it's a little bit higher margin of, for the store. Anyway, so I don't have any upfront inventory costs. The books I'm selling on Bookshop are not my books. They're not the books in my basement. They're books in the Ingram warehouse. And so, the 30%, like I said, is below that 42% kind of threshold. But on the other hand, I do not have any upfront costs, right? For books, I don't have to buy the books. I don't spend $20,000 on inventory. I do not have to store the books. I do not need to ship the books. And I do not need to process credit cards, because they literally do that for you too. In fact, I don't even have to collect sales tax, because I inquired about this at the end of last year about my taxes, and they were saying there's something called tax jar. So tax jar is basically, they collect the sales tax, and I don't know, through the magic of whatever, they basically cover your sales tax. So it's non-taxable income for the Massachusetts state sales tax. So it's pretty simple. It's a far cry from running like my own shop. I mean, this is sort of like book selling with training wheels. That's why I say, like, I'm not an expert. Kate's the one who's been running a bricks and mortar real deal shop with staff and all the things that go along with having a bricks and mortar shop. I'm trying to work collaboratively with her. The reason I've been in close communication with Kate, actually, and she's now on our cooperative steering committee. So let me explain a little bit about that. Do you guys have any questions about like Bookshop, or like what we're doing, and how the fact that we're like really kind of like not a real bookstore, but we're just having fun while we're doing it? Okay, I'll keep going. Cooperative. All right. I have sort of two motivations about the cooperative piece. One is personal, and the other is ideological. I think cooperatives are cool. I've studied them. I've read about them. I read like Collective Courage, Professor Numbard's book, and I've read other books on that. That's the kind of person I am. I like to just dig deep into, like, if I get into something, I read all the books on it and do the research and the homework. And I think there's a lot there. I've written about cooperatives a little bit. I write a column for the Dorchester Reporter. I'm a little bit on a hiatus because I'm busy starting this bookstore. So I told Bill Forey that I need to take a little break from the column. But I've written about Cero, the composting co-op, in the Reporter. I wrote about, what else did I write about? Dorchester Food Co-op. I wrote a column about them. So in doing those columns, I met people in the cooperative space, and I was really impressed with the work they were doing. I just thought it was really great. So I think, I see the bookstore. Oh, just again, to finish that thought, the personal reason is, I think the Kate Late model, and if she was on this call, I would say this even if she was on the call right now. The Kate Late model of like, single owner. She's not a sole proprietor; she's an LLC, but still, she's a single owner of an LLC. I'm not into it. I'm not really, like, I don't want to just pour my, blood, sweat, and tears into, 80-hour weeks to like birth a child. I already have a child. She's 6. She already takes a lot of time. Like, I want the life work balance. I do. I mean, so that's the personal reason. I think the sole proprietorship model is kind of broken, and I think a model where people kind of link arms and like really come together as a community to, especially for something like a bookstore. I mean no disrespect to like someone who like runs a restaurant, starts a family restaurant, and things like that. I know there's great great business out there, but just for me personally, it's just not where I am in my life. Not with a 6-year-old, who has medical complexity. My daughter was born 3 months early. So she was born like 1 pound, 6 ounces, like spent 2 years on oxygen. She still has developmental delays and related issues. So I'm a parent, and I'm also a parent of a child who has special needs. So, I'm very mindful of the time that it takes, to parent. So, and I want to respect that, and I don't want to like interfere with that too much. So anyway, that's just a little personal story. On the cooperative front, I found in my research, I found that there's Stacy Cordero. Do you guys know? You probably know Stacy. So I found out that Stacy was available for consulting through the city of Boston's on-site technical assistance program. So I applied and got approved. Kind of a miracle, but they approved my application. And I jumped through all the little hoops, and I should look at the chat. Are people telling me like to slow down or talk less? Or
no, we're definitely monitoring.
Good. Okay. Okay. So we basically linked up with Stacy. We got 30 hours of consulting. Stacy feels like if we run out of the 30 hours, we might be able to re-up, because 30 is kind of the minimum that the city will give. So I'm kind of hoping we could get another 30, because we're going to blow through those 30s, like 30 pretty fast. We formed, I worked really hard to create a cooperative steering committee. They're on the website, except for Kate. Kate actually just joined. I just invited her to join just like 2 weeks ago. So she's also on it, but she's not on the website. But if you look at the website with the bios of the people who are on the committee, I was very intentional about forming that group, and I wanted it to represent the diversity of Roslindale, racial diversity of experiences, diversity of talents and skills, and I think it's a strong group. We've only met 4 times. We meet once a month, and we're basically assessing the feasibility of us incorporating. Right now we're a sole proprietorship, actually, but we're looking into whether we could incorporate as a cooperative. Now, I will say this: the landscape for commercial property in Roslindale is dismal. It is just dismal. I literally had a phone conversation today with, thank you, Jenny, for putting the link in, with, do I name names? Should I name names? Everyone knows her, Doris. She is like, I'll call her she's like the Mr. Potter of Roslindale. I mean, she owns like half the town. And she's sitting here pleading poverty with me, saying she wants $3,400 a month for 700 square feet. I'm like, no. And when I said, but this is a community-oriented bookstore, and I tried to kind of explain what we're about, this is my first phone conversation with her. And I went into it with eyes wide open. I've heard she's a hard person to deal with. And I heard that she's not really willing to be flexible on the rent. But I was kind of just curious how she would respond. I said, hey, we're a real community-oriented business. We have a lot of community connections. We raised like $1,500 for local community organizations last year, blah, 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 blah. Would you have any flexibility on the 3,400? Because I'm going to tell you right now, that's not doable. And she's like, nope. My business, I'm really struggling. I'm really she's like pleading poverty. I'm like, you owed like half of Roslindale. So anyway, it's disheartening. I will say it's disheartening because, I don't right now. We have very low overhead, and I kind of like it that way, and I'm kind of a little bit, I have trepidations about sort of being swamped with the monthly. I don't want to be rent poor as a business. So it's something I would encourage Ujima to really look into, because I feel like there's a deeper issue here, right? Like how it's like the landlords are stifling the economic creativity of the community. And I don't know what the answer is. There's people smarter than me that can help answer that. I know I heard recently that New York City, which I grew up in New York City, I'm a transplant to Boston. I lived in New York City from 1974 to 1999. And someone was telling me that, and I actually read in a book recently that New York City used to have commercial rent control commercial rent control. I grew up in a rent control apartment. I know rent control. My mom's still in the same rent control apartment she moved into in 1968. But commercial, I didn't even know that there was commercial rent control. So, and I remember growing up in the city, and maybe other people remember cities where they grew up, Boston or other cities that were more just those mom and pop shops, those just like those really creative stores, you know, that were there. And it wasn't an accident. There was public policy that actually supported that, right? And so I don't know if it's something that Ujima could kind of delve into. Maybe you guys already have. I don't want to assume that you haven't. Maybe you guys are doing so much cool stuff that maybe you've already looked into this. But like, how do we change the policy landscape to allow businesses to thrive, to just even just get open the doors, just to, you know, to just try something out? Because right now the cost, it's so cost prohibitive. So anyway, those are my thoughts. And trust me, especially in the book business, because the margins are thin. No one is in this to make $1 million. Trust me, the margins are really thin. You're lucky if you have a 2%, you know, profit at the end of the year. That's, people just operate because people want to go into books just like me. They're doing it because they have a passion for books and they want to build community. That is what drives booksellers, right? That's what drives me. That's what drives Kate. That's what drives pretty much every independent bookseller I've ever met and talked to. They're great people. They're a really interesting group of people. But they're not in it to like, you know, retire with some big fortune. You know, no one's making a ton of money on books, but yet they still want to do it, and they're still doing it. So, you know, how can we encourage that in Boston? How can we keep that going? So that's about it. I'm close to the precipice of my existing knowledge.
First of all, I'm going to say just thank you, Roy. And I know, yep, we have some questions coming in. So let me just jump in and invite Louise to ask a question.
What can we do about the housing? We have groups that are fighting for rent control now. We're trying to get more land into the nonprofit. We're trying to, it's like right to the city like Viva Urbana. You know, there's and I mean, you have a new idea of rent control for businesses. And we're talking about rent control, and I even suggested even for the high rents, don't let them jack up the high rents, because I know some restaurants, they're charging $10,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are groups, I'm trying to think of them all. There are several groups fighting for it. Homes for All,
Mm-hmm.
Right to the City, City Life. And sometimes the community development corporations, like the South Boston Community Development, wanted to make affordable housing for an church land, but the neighbors didn't want it, so they kind of lost. But they're trying to get more property into the affordable.
I see someone put in the chat, community land trust for commercial spaces. That's a good idea.
I'm gonna before everyone starts jumping in, Abby, I know you have a question. I'm just gonna invite Mickey to ask her questions. I know I saw your hand go up first, and so let's.
Hi, Roy.
Hi, Mickey. Nice to see you.
And I'm just wondering about a mixed-use space. I know I posted about a mixed-use building in the chat, but I mean maybe a bookstore that is part coffee shop, restaurant, and something else, laundry, something functional that we all have to do, that could maybe be, if there were three, it could be $1,000 a month for the tiny space, and hours could be shared and stuff like that. Has that been thought of?
You know, a lot of bookstores are certainly moving in that direction. A lot of bookstores have cafes. There's different opinions on it. You know, some people swear by it, like, you know, and then others are like, it's a headache and it takes you away from your core business. And, you know, it's not I like the idea personally, but you have to do some digging into that. I mean, really thinking big, like I've had to really look at spaces that actually exist, and I kind of squint my eyes and see like what could work. Do you guys know the old Petco, the old Unleashed by Petco store, which is vacant and it will continue to be empty because Petco is still paying the rent every month, and they will for another 4 years. So the landlord has no incentive to rent that building because they're just basically, it's a cash cow. I've looked at that building, and I think, that gravy train will come to its final station. That's, within, 4 years. So I think of that building as having so much potential in Rosendale. The location is great, but it's huge. I would not need that much space for a bookstore. You'd only need maybe a quarter of that space. So, in my dreamy optimist moments, I look at that space and I think, what if it was like a cooperative, like public market? Like a kind of a hybrid of like, take like Dorchester Food Co-op idea, but then also with the Boston Public Market with stalls, right? With stalls, like, with each, so it gives you, it's an incubator space, basically a big business incubator. Someone might stay there permanently. They might outgrow it and kind of spin off into another, maybe their own storefront or whatever. But yeah, you just kind of like walking in the shop, and you've got artists selling their arts and crafts stuff. You got some books over here. You got a cafe over here. And it's something that I've never really, frankly, seen before, but I have had that idea. And again, but the idea would be that the space is huge. So how do you break it down into smaller spaces that people could afford, like maybe a couple $100 a month for each business?
Yeah, these places were all over the place in the 60s, but you guys don't know that. There were many of them.
Thank you, Mickey. And I'm gonna hold my questions. I'm gonna invite Abby, and then there are some comments and thoughts in the chat. So feel free to take a look at those, particularly everyone else. Abby, would you want to ask your question?
Yes, but sorry, it's not so much a question as it is just a comment. So yeah, I was the one that just posted about the community land trust for commercial spaces. And the one I put in the chat is a super cool example out of Anchorage, Alaska. And so the community came together, bought the land, and then not only worked to have housing, but also commercial spaces. And then there's one that I can send right now. That is another cool example, because that was collective ownership of like the physical building. So whereas the land trust is like the ground and the land, the other one is like the physical building itself. So Roy, it sounds like exactly what you were thinking of. A whole bunch of community small businesses came together. They couldn't buy the building on their own. And then even community members were allowed for, I think, like $4 or $100 or something to invest. And then they got to share the profit. So it's like working that way up. And then there's one more example. I can't exactly remember where it's happening. It's somewhere in California, but there's an old mall, and community members as well are trying to buy back the entire mall. So there's some cool examples out there.
I mean, interestingly, the substation, which I mentioned earlier, was a public-private partnership that developed the substation, which, if you know Rosendale, it was an eyesore for 4 or 5 decades. It was an AC/DC switching operation that basically helped. It was for the trolleys, right? So the community did pull together, and there were private investors. There was I think some city funds. There were some grants. They kind of cobbled it all together. But the sad thing about that, I wasn't part of that whole endeavor. I just learned the history. The sad thing is that it seems to me it was like kind of a missed opportunity, because it's actually just privately owned, and I just feel like, I don't know, like they could have done what you're talking about, which is what they really should have done, but they didn't. So, I mean, we can't go backwards, but it's kind of unfortunate that didn't happen, because that was clearly something that needed a really like a collective effort to revive this, basically this huge brick shell of an industrial building in the middle of Rosendale. But anyway, I think the Petco thing we should keep eyeing, because yeah, it's like, I don't want to rent that building. I want to own that building. And when I say I mean like a collective, a cooperative enterprise to own it and do something amazing with it. So why not stay? Why not stay? Okay, that's a really good question, John. Nice to see you, John. Actually, I don't see you. Are you on video, John? Let's see you.
He's there.
I'm right here.
Hey, John, nice to see you.
Good to see you, my brother.
That's a really good question, and actually, it's in the forefront of my mind because tomorrow I am having a phone conversation with Common Good. Have you guys connected with these folks? Common Good, the Common Good cards, yeah.
And right, if you don't mind me interrupting, I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
what John wrote first, and then feel
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, why not stay? The question was, why not stay with your current virtual model? Why do you need an actual physical space? I literally have been, John, that's so funny you asked that question because I've literally been pondering that question all day. I actually went on a hike this afternoon, and that was one of the things I was like thinking. I was like, maybe we could just be virtual. Now, here's the thing. On the one hand, it is not even close to the vision that I have because I did not get into this business to run a virtual business, right? I'm all about like the people and the meeting space and the community, right? But I happen to, the reason I brought up Common Good is because I was poking around the Common Good website yesterday in anticipation of a phone call that I have with them tomorrow. And if you guys don't know Common Good, it's you basically buy this Common Good card, you pay money. I mean, you pay money into a Common Good card. There's no fees for either a business or the consumer. Whatever you put in, you have dollar for dollar, you can spend in a participating business. And then what they do is they take the float, which is the money that's like in the pool, that's, you know, kind of whatever generating, I guess, interest, and they generate money. I think Greenfield, the first one, Greenfield, Massachusetts, where it started, they had like $10,000 that they gave to like micro grants in the community, doing all sorts of cool stuff. So interesting model, definitely worth checking out. And oh yeah. So while poking around their website, I happened to find a bookstore called Massive Books in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and it's a Common Good participant. And they are an online only bookstore. And that's it. They don't want us. They're not going to start a store, I don't think. They're just like, we're happy doing the online thing. And they're doing all sorts of amazing stuff in the community. And in terms of mutual aid and sustainability projects and racial justice projects, doing all this great stuff. And I thought the epiphany that I had was, you know what, maybe we just don't need to have a bricks and mortar. Maybe that's the piece that just doesn't need to be part of it. Maybe we just continue online. In other words, can we do community without the bricks and mortar? And maybe the answer is yes. You know, I don't know.
Well,
I'm thinking about it.
I want to say, Roy, I mean, as you know, we at the church buy books from you, but I'm promoting you as the righteous alternative to Jeff Bezos. I mean, you know, I don't want to give. There's a convenience factor too. I'm going to say I bought, like I buy all my books from Roy now, from Rozzie Bound, because I know that part of the profits is going to causes I care about, and it really is an alternative to Amazon, which, you know, is fighting unions in Alabama, and Jeff Bezos is the richest billionaire in the world. Yeah.
Thanks for that, John. And then if I could take a step back really quickly, I have Sierra with a question, and then I'm going to highlight some more comments made in the chat for the sake of the recording, because there are folks who can't necessarily see it who are going to be viewing it online as well. So Sierra.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I just wanted to highlight that we actually did a pilot with Common Good. I think most of the people in this space know this or did participate in it when we did our pilot with Deadly Cafe for a good while. So I just want to uplift that.
How was your experience with that?
Oh, the experience was great. I think that people really liked it. Part of our charge is producing an alternative currency, which is why we were interested. I think Ujima, I wasn't a part of this iteration of Ujima, I was just a volunteer in that point, but definitely had the Common Good card. I think a lot of people had it. I think that the snag that we ran into was that we ended the pilot with Deadly Cafe because we started out with one cafe in Roxbury, Deadly Cafe. And we ended it. So I think it was good. But yeah, I know that this is a feasibility study on bookstores, so I'm going to end it there.
Thanks, Sierra. I know, Sierra, you also put in here Wild Child in Somerville as well. Sounds like a possible?
Oh, yes, the public-private, or not public-private, the hybrid models. Frugal Bookstore obviously started out as a bookstore and furniture store. I used to go there when I was a kid, when I first moved to Boston. So I just wanted to uplift that. And Wild Child in Somerville is a wine store or wine shop and bookstore as well. So just a couple hybrids. I also noticed when you were talking about when y'all were talking about what it would look like to have the collective space where people just rented booths. Black market, that was actually one of our community needs, was a space like that, a black market type space where people could rent out booths. So just wanted to uplift those things that are happening in the community.
Thanks, Sierra.
Nice. That's awesome. That's great.
I love the black market idea as well too, because that definitely has an economic multiplier effect, particularly on small businesses, direct investment in community and homes. That's a great one. And then there was a comment over here from Jack. What about a mobile van with climate control? I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Roy.
I mean, I don't have much to say. I think it's an interesting idea. I would I would think about it. Yeah, definitely. I think that's interesting. Like a book truck instead of a food truck.
Right.
That's cool. I like it.
And I'll ask, I'm going to ask Jack to say a little bit more about it, and then we'll transition to James.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, you can think about a book, a book van, okay? Just like an actual library where you organize it, you have shelf, you can actually have the shelves be designed in a removable level where one day without having to reassemble, putting book back on the shelf, where you can move actual shelf out with the books on them and replace them with another shelf. Make it very removable and easy to get around. Now, and at the same time, you're looking at maybe one, like 2 or 3 chairs you can have in there so people can, sit if they want to sit outside. Now, don't forget, summertime, you can bring more than 2 to 3 chairs. People put it out there for people to actually sit out. Now, you think about it more like, summertime you bring about maybe 10 chairs, maybe more than 10 chairs. However, you can fit inside that van for summertime. Wintertime, then you have just about maybe 2, 3 chairs for people to sit inside where they can actually enjoy reading a book and, like browsing through within a controlled climate. So, and to be quite honest with you, John, I mean, Roy, my apology, Roy, that's an avenue where I'm moving towards for my company. So, providing services, technical services to our clients mobilely. So when, especially in this pandemic, I can have them bring their devices right to the van, and then we take care of it without, it's contactless. But you can look into that, and I can share some information I have on the van, as I've already started some works, doing some research on that. So feel free to reach out to me.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jack.
No problem, Roy.
And another sort of outside the box idea could be just honestly, I mean, more pop-ups, but also even like the farmers market. And there's farmers markets throughout the city. So the stall fees are generally very low. The Rosendale Farmers Market, it's not that expensive to rent a stall. So that's something I've considered. I've been kind of thinking about.
And sorry, Johnny. You think about that pop-up too, using a mobile van for that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's just that. I mean, that's where I'm moving towards. So sorry, Johnny. Floor is yours.
You're all set. Nothing to be apologetic about. I'm going to drop the notes to this conversation and other conversations about feasibility studies. Particularly, there are interview questions that we ask about this particular study from Kate at Paper Cuts. And so she's also offered her responses to those. And so feel free for everyone in this space to take a look at those responses related to bookstores and her experience. And then I'm going to invite James, who has a question as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much of a question as much as just maybe a reaction, but just appreciate hearing about this. Roy, thanks for coming through. I guess it made me also think about, because of the realities, you mentioned booksellers doing this for community and like the margins aren't very significant, and also just like the fact that it's so expensive to offer a book and mortar sort of shop for bookselling, and how for me for so long, especially here in Boston, right? Because everyone's just getting kicked out and displaced. And I was just thinking a little bit about how my frame for books selling and book has always been about brick and mortar, and it made me want to think about like really trying to explore what are other like book selling models that are in our community that are led by people of color that are maybe are doing the same thing, but like, and have evolved because of survival, because of the realities of like the community that we're in, but are still offering like knowledge, like a knowledge hub in a different way, and how we can sort of present those as like menus or like possibilities for prospective booksellers who are exploring that as a path. Because I just don't know. I guess my point here is just like it made me think that at least I don't know if I don't know if all of those options are always available to folks. So it made me think like I think that's something that I think we could maybe outline more. But yeah.
I definitely I appreciate what you're saying, and I think we should be thinking creatively, and there's I think there are many examples of alternatives. Certainly like this is why I'm looking into the cooperative model. I don't want to necessarily be just a traditional for-profit retail business. I think at the end of the day, it's actually less about the books than it is about the people. I come from, and relationships, learning, community building. I come from the nonprofit education sector. So at heart, I'm a nonprofit person, but I also frankly got sick of hustling for dollars from philanthropy. So this is sort of like my effort to try to it's almost like building a nonprofit, but that has its own source of revenue. So you don't have to go kind of hand in hand and have more independence. So that's just kind of where a lot of this is coming from. So yeah, I think I'm not wedded to the traditional retail model. Not at all. So I appreciate that. I think there are models in communities of color that we can most certainly learn from. I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's why I had the whole steering committee read. I literally gave them a thank you gift of collective courage. I gave a copy of Collective Courage to every member of the steering committee because I believe that, and we had to learn from what people have done in the past, specifically communities of color have done in the past.
Thank you for that. Because there isn't hands currently raised and questions in the chat necessarily, I just figured I'd just ask a few things. Well, one, let me just add that particularly part of planning ideation.
Johnny Charles.
Oh, maybe not.
No, really quickly, you said a few things. I just want to put a number to the few since it's 7:12 and 7:15 is member team. I just want to name that. That's all. Carry on.
I appreciate it.
You're awesome. Carry on.
You got called out, my friend. You got called out.
Always, always. It's welcome. It's welcome. We're learning and growing together. I'm gonna shorten this by saying that part of what we were thinking, particularly within the Ujima Fund, is really kind of supporting community-owned land. And so those conversations we continue to explore. And so just wanted to just name and frame the fact that like, this is definitely on top of mind for us as we're thinking about the hiking, the exploitation of commercial real estate in the market that is Boston and New England. So we're currently thinking about that as well too. But Roy, I just wanted to ask, so you mentioned the property owner or commercial owner, particularly in Rosendale, and your conversation with them. So I'm wondering, did you have like any specs in particular what you were looking for? Square feet, cost per square feet, like what were you looking for? And realistically, if you had the opportunity to get into a brick and mortar, what does that look like for you?
That's a great question. I was literally just talking to Kate about this yesterday. Kate Late had said that the sweet spot for a bookstore, let me make sure I get her numbers right, she thinks is 1,500 to 1,800 square feet. I hope I'm quoting her correctly on that. There is something as too small. There is such a thing as too small in the book business, right? You need to have like sort of inventory turns, and that's like it's an important part of the trade. But and then obviously too big, you're gonna be rent poor, so you can't sustain it too big unless you have the discretionary spending of like a Brookline and Brookline Booksmith, this kind of thing, right? But so 15. I'm kind of thinking about that 1,500 square feet. The space that I was looking at with this particular landlord is on Birch Street. It's kind of a prime location, so a little smaller, 750. Also has a matching basement with the same 750. So you're kind of getting into the 1,300. That was horrible math. 1,500 square feet. Yeah, but in terms of numbers, I'm trying to get it down to $20 a square foot if I can. If you do her numbers, her math adds up to, I think, $55 a square foot. So you're talking about just a world apart. So there is the reason the $20 a square foot comes to mind because there's a new development coming into Rosendale, proposed development on Washington Street, and Arcs Urban. This is public. I've been in conversation with the developer, but this is public. They have a BPDA proposal. They've already had their first public hearing. This is Arcs Urban, and they've developed some properties, and I'm doing some due diligence on them because I've heard mixed things. They've done some developments in Dorchester. It's a mission-driven, self-proclaimed mission-driven developer. They're very committed to sustainability. They're committed to mixed income. They try to do 66 or 70% restricted, income restricted units, right? So usually like a third low income, a third middle income, and a third roughly of like market. They're very interested in us coming in. Their project is enticing largely because the landlord, Arcs Urban, is the current owner of the building. This is 4200 Washington Street, a block from Adams Park. He wants to get me to $20 a square foot, or as close to it as he possibly can. And he said he's willing to give me some free rent, like maybe even 6 months free rent when we start. He's just been having those conversations that are like, I like what you're doing, Roy. I think you're really truly committed to the community. I want this kind of business in my building. You know what I mean? Literally the opposite type of conversation that I had today with the Birch Street landlord. So, I'm taking it seriously. I'm taking that very seriously. So 20, that's the number I have in my head, and that's 20. So in terms of, you guys know, you calculated, it's like you take the number of square feet, that's the rent for the year. So then whatever that number is, you divide that by 12, and that's your monthly rent. So roughly speaking, for the space we're talking about there, we're talking somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 a month if you count the like utilities and things like that. Probably with the utilities, going to probably be closer to 2,000. But anyway, a bigger space for a lot less rent than the Birch Street. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. And then
Arcs Urban. I'll put it in there. I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. And at this point, we're going to close it out. We're already at 7:15, particularly the workshop portion of the and as you're typing that up, Roy, we just want to say big thank you. Abby, is that like a ready for a question or okay? All right.
No, I was deep in thought.
Gotcha. I want to make sure I didn't want to miss anyone.
Thank
so
you.
we're gonna stop recording at this point.